speakers here, Japheth Omojua, who came from Nigeria and absolutely owned the stage. And those of you who know Japheth know he's an intellect, a writer, but also a performer. And he electrified almost 900 young people from all across East Africa who said life can be different. We can do things differently, and we will. I came here from France where I was at a 30th anniversary. I know it's hard to imagine I'm that old, but a 30th anniversary of Friends of Liberty who have been meeting in France promoting this, and we had people from Bulgaria, from Ukraine, from countries that at that time had been suffering under communism. And it was such a great feeling to realize that being in the movement for liberty means having friends, people who will be with you for a lifetime. Friendship is at the core of our ideas. I see over here Leon Lowe, another longtime friend. I learned not to say old friends, but a longtime friend. People who support statism, believe in conflict. They believe in the zero-sum world, where for some to gain, others have to lose. And it creates the mentality of the enemy. And they're about fighting enemies. But if you believe in liberty, you want to change enemies into friends. We don't want to defeat our enemies. We want to make more friends. And it means that when you're alone sometimes and things are difficult, as for instance our friend Rejoice Ngwenya has experienced in Zimbabwe, you know you are not alone. That there are people across the continent and across the world who are your friends, and they care about you, and they are thinking of you. When I have worked with people in difficult places and given them a book, whether it's in one dictatorship or another, and they say, "Thank you so much, how can I thank you?" My answer is, someday I want you to give a book to someone in North Korea, someone suffering from tyranny today. That is the best way to thank me, is to turn around and help another person to achieve their liberty. So this program is more than about just sharing ideas. It's about sharing friendships. And those will last for your whole life. People you have met here for the first time, you can be in touch with, and you can experience the beauty of solidarity, of supporting liberty together, and of being friends for liberty. So I encourage everyone here to reject the enemy mentality that statism promulgates, the zero-sum view, that they're enemies, to say we don't want to live in a world of enemies. We want to make friends for liberty. And with that, I would like to turn to the awards portion of the program. I'd like to invite my colleagues, Magat Wade, who is the director of Atlas Network's Center for African Prosperity, and Atlas Network CEO Brad Lips, to the stage to help me give out the Student Outreach Award and the 2019 Africa Liberty Award. First, Magat, would you share some thoughts?
Thank you, Tom. Good evening, everyone. What I want to share with you guys tonight, right now, really, it's a profound, deep feeling of gratitude for everyone in this room and all that you've been doing over the years. I know that your work is among some of the hardest work. We all know where our continent is at right now, especially when it comes to these ideas. I know some of you have risked your lives and are probably still risking your lives. So from where I'm standing at tonight, I just think we should take maybe this moment, this evening, as a moment to let the hair down and maybe celebrate a little bit how far we've come, how far you've come. We have so much more work to do going forward, but let's just tonight be a moment of celebration where we recalibrate and look at the future. I'm not going to bore you with a long talk, not tonight at least. But yeah, all I wanted was to thank you. And please, celebrate yourselves. Let's recharge the batteries. We've got a lot of work to do. Thank you, guys.
Now, it's my pleasure to begin with the Student Outreach Award. Each year, we award the Student Outreach Award to a group that has undertaken effective and impactful work to engage young people and students with the ideas of classical liberalism. I'm very happy this evening to congratulate the award winner, Libre Afrique. Libre Afrique manages the website, libreafrique.org, and it makes the ideas of liberty available across Africa in French language. And this is a very important project to bridge the communities in Africa that speak multiple languages to share the goal of liberty across a great continent. And they receive this award today for their work training activists throughout Francophone Africa. So I wish to invite to the stage Oguma Ayena Salaman, Adumaji Majistan Magloire, and Toure El Haji Bubakar. Please come and join us. And they will receive the award. Now, it's time to introduce our three finalists for the Africa Liberty Award. This is a very difficult process because there are so many exciting and wonderful and powerful activities taking place in Africa. Finalist number one, our first finalist for the 2019 Africa Liberty Award is Imani Center for Policy and Education, represented by Franklin Cujo. Imani is nominated for this award for their Doing Business Reform campaign, which advocates reforms to Ghana's business environment to make it more attractive, more competitive, and able to produce shared value for all the people of Ghana. Our second finalist for the 2019 Africa Liberty Award is African Students for Liberty, represented by Linda Kavuka. African Students for Liberty is nominated for their project on the principles of free markets in Nigeria, which taught 90 fellows intensively, 90 young people from the northeast region of Nigeria, about win-win solutions to problems, about creating shared value through markets, in the hope that this will encourage them to provide an alternative to the violence and despair of Boko Haram. Finalist number three. Our third finalist for the 2019 Africa Liberty Award is Audace Institute Afrique, represented by Mehmet Issa Ndeya. Audace Institute Afrique is nominated for their work on liberating the potential in rural lands in Côte d'Ivoire. In Côte d'Ivoire, only 4% of landholdings are legally registered. And Audace Institute Afrique is working to secure property rights in the country by mapping out property lines, working with villages to create the necessary institutions, and then registering them on the blockchain. Thank you. Magat, you have the winner.
I do.
Can we get a drum roll, please?
Yes, please.
Let's see.
The glasses as well.
Okay, please.
All right, so the winner is Audace Institute Afrique.
Thank you. It was quite a surprise. I was so focused on my salads. On behalf of Odasa Institute, I would like to thank you all for coming, and we're really grateful for this prize. Our endeavor is not that easy. What we're trying to achieve is to provide wealth, to unlock wealth, by providing rural areas with land certificates that would allow those people in those rural areas to get loans, to use the land as a collateral. And this prize is really, I'm getting emotional about that, but it's really an achievement because it was hard, it was tough. Getting the government support on that is, when you talk about property, is an area that really touches sovereignty of the different countries we're talking about. I'm actually focusing about Francophone Africa. So thanks Atlas for believing in us. Thank you all, and see you soon for better achievement. Thank you.
Well, it's wonderful to be here in Kenya with our co-host African Students for Liberty. It's a fantastic, beautiful country. I hope you have an opportunity to see more than the hotel, as nice as it is, because Kenya is one of the jewels of Africa. We're also very fortunate to be joined by the Rambolo Dance Group, and I'd like to invite them to the stage for a short performance before we break for dinner.
Come on on! Wololo, wololo! Miathum! Aye! Yeah, 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 yeah! Come on on! Aye! Yeah, 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 yeah! Aye! Yeah, 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 yeah! Nama puro tok dalao, atoro magoya. Nama puro tok dalao, atoro magoya. Aye! Yeah, 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 yeah! Wolo, 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 wolo! Aye! Yeah, 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 yeah! Aye! Yeah, 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 yeah! Nama puro tok dalao, atoro magoya. Nama puro tok dalao, atoro magoya. Eroa! Omone kaluka, awero morena. Yaton we donda, awero morena. Omone kaluka, awero morena. Yaton we donda, awero morena. Atungro, nyamagara magar karkende, atungro mo nyamagara. Gar karkendio, atungro, nyamagara magar karkende, atungro mo nyamagara. Songa, songa, awinya munya 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 songa, mujasonga. Hey, owa ngwenyo mujasonga kam. Nangoa, owa ngwenyo.
I now have a very remarkable and signal honor, and that is to introduce our speaker for this evening, Ambassador Dr. Martin Kimani. Dr. Kimani is the President's Special Envoy for Countering Violent Extremism and Director of Kenya's National Counterterrorism Center. Let me move that up here. The NCTC is an interagency institution established by the Prevention of Terrorism Act of 2012 to coordinate national counterterrorism measures in order to prevent, detect, deter, and disrupt acts of terrorism. And it has been charged with the coordination of counterterrorism strategy and policy implementation, the coordination of counter-radicalization, disengagement, and rehabilitation. And it's a focal point for bilateral and multilateral partnerships in counterterrorism. Previously, Dr. Kimani served as Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary to the United Nations and as Permanent Representative to the UN Environment Program and the UN Human Settlements Program. And in the past 20 years, he's worked at a senior level in global currency and bond markets, political risk advisory, and other ventures around the Horn of Africa and East Africa. He's a fellow of the African Leadership Initiative, a member of the Aspen Global Leadership Network, a member of the advisory board of the Gordon Institute of Business at the University of Pretoria, and was Distinguished African Fellow at the South African Institute of International Affairs. He holds a PhD in War Studies from King's College, University of London, and, I should add, has created an extraordinarily successful joint venture with my longtime friend, June Arunga Kimani, and some of the products of that amazing joint venture are here with us this evening. Please join us, Martin Kimani.
Good evening. Good evening again. Thank you, Tom. And I just want to say before I get started that my speech was prepared by Aspen. So if it's very good, it's me. If it's very bad, it's just young Aspen staffers here. For those of you who've flown into Nairobi for this conference, welcome. Thank you for the introduction, Tom. My thanks also goes to Brad and James and the team that put this together, including Linda Kavuka. Congratulations on... It's an extraordinary event, and I'm so glad that it's happening here in Nairobi. I also want to especially recognize Linda, who all of you know, who I've known through my wife for a long time, but who I've come to call a friend. And last night we had dinner with her and a group from Atlas and Linda, and it got quite late, and Linda wanted to know if the younger people at the table were feeling tired, because she was ready to keep going. So Linda, welcome back to Kenya. Your passion in wanting to change the world is an inspiration to so many people I know in this room, me included. Thank you. I also want to say, before I go any further, that I came here with my children because I wanted them to meet June's many friends. And I asked my daughter, what should I tell them? And I'll quote her. She said to say, business right now is going slowly, but it will improve. A lot of shops will open, and it will be a good place for business. Thank you, Kerigo. I prepared my remarks after seeing the different topics that were being discussed earlier in the day and tomorrow, and in the hope that my remarks here will add to the solutions and insights that you're all generating. I don't want to offer, answers as if I know them all, but rather to set out maybe a few insights of my own, my experience in government, and really to provoke you in a positive way. I know this is a room of passionate people who are trying to change their countries and this continent and the world. And so take my remarks positively, even if they sound a bit critical. The thing that most moves me personally is the idea of unleashing African genius. This continent is full of genius, extraordinary people. Our diversity, our cultural diversity, the differences in our experiences, the differences in our exposure, the differences in the weather, in our flora and fauna, all make for an extraordinarily diverse continent. Meaning that the way people interpret their lives and the way they think about shaping their lives also is characterized by extraordinary diversity. There's a lot of wealth in Africa, in not just under the soil, but in the cultures of the people who live here. Not static cultures, but dynamic cultures that are growing every day and changing every day. And we need to unleash that talent and that genius, because not only does Africa need that genius unleashed, but also the whole world needs it. I say this knowing that when Kenya got its independence from the United Kingdom in 1963, our population at approximately 9 million was a third of Spain's. We're going to have our census next week. Every decade we have a census. And it will be found that Kenya's population has probably topped or at least matched Spain's 47 million or so. From 1963 to today, we have caught up with Spain. And Sweden in 1963 had a population almost like ours.
And today, Sweden's population is just, I think, under 10 million, and ours has basically quadrupled their population. By 2035, the youth that will reach working age in Africa will be more than the youth reaching working age in the rest of the world combined. By 2050, 1 in every 4 people will be African. Now, I take it with a pinch of salt when you do very long projections, but if the present trends continue, and they may not, by 2100, Africans will make up 40% of the global population. If this demographic reality is not turned into a global dividend, not just an African dividend, it will feed and drive the greatest risks to the world's peace and security. It does not matter how many walls you build. If Africans do not get wealthy in Africa, we are coming to the rest of the world. It's inevitable. And so, the question becomes, as this enormous demographic bulge is happening, who will the minds and the loyalty of these young people belong to? What will be the ideas that animate their understanding of the world? How will they seek to relate to governments and to each other? The people in this room, I think, already understand how much work they have to do to ensure that your ideas become the dominant ideas amongst the young people of this continent. And that's why I'm very glad that Atlas and the Students for Liberty are looking specifically at young people here on the continent. Where do we live? We live in a continent that has realized its independence very recently, 50, 60 years, 70 years at most. A continent where people have been brought together in countries that they did not choose to be part of, but that they must now turn into nations. A continent that has experienced different state approaches to the economy, and broadly speaking, by consensus, has sought to deregulate and liberalize itself, to open up trade to itself, but is at the infancy of that process. We're in a continent and a country here in Kenya where the individual's identity is subsumed into the group's identity most often. This comes not only from tradition, but the peculiar way in which our social and political lives have evolved over the last few decades. I feel I have to start there because at the core of all the changes that you in this room seek to free the person, to free enterprise, to free the person from red tape, from oppression, to free them from the hand of a tyrannical state or tyrannical politicians, you have to begin with the notion that African lives are precious, that African lives matter, that a single African life is the equal of any life on the planet. When you start there, immediately you start to realize that the structures around us, and not just the state structures, many of the social structures and cultural constructs we have not singled out the individual in that way. They've singled out what we call community, they've singled out what we call family, but the individual remains subsumed and subject to the group. I don't want any Africans here to be offended by what I'm saying, but it's the truth. Not entirely, the continent is diverse enough to take differences, but broadly speaking, it's the truth. If the value is in the group more than the individual, then the freeing of the individual to pursue his or her genius is subject to the process of the group, whether it's political or cultural or within even the family. And each group has its minders, its leaders, and those who keep watch at the gate. They are more concerned with the fate of the group than that of the individual. So it seems to me that the first mission you have, and the most difficult mission, is to protect that minority of one from the whims of the majority. Now, this is not easy, and it's a long-term issue. It does not mean the erasure of African culture, but rather it means the highlighting of the individual as the bottom line of that culture. But it's a bit harder than just sort of going with the idea of the liberty and the freedom of the individual. Because in many parts of this continent, danger and fragility are rife. The state, rather than being the overwhelming heavy weight in every part of the society, is very often missing. In many parts of the continent, it's not the presence of the state sometimes, it's its weakness and its absence that brings the most suffering to people. Where the state in many parts of this continent lacks a strong presence are to be found forms of coercive order that are criminal, violent, and deeply destabilizing to any attempt to build sustained, successful enterprises, to hold on to your property, and to raise your families safely. So it means that much of your mission here is not necessarily just to roll back the state. And here I'm not talking about a few regulations and red tape. That's obvious, it needs work. I'm saying that we have to find our liberty in a constitutional order and a legal order that creates and sustains a state that respects the sanctity of the citizen. A state of that kind assumes the citizen exists, and that citizen embraces rights and responsibilities to his or her fellows. It assumes a citizen who is educated enough, even if not formally, to embrace the Commonwealth and feel that the law is aligned to his moral code. That liberty requires a politics whose competitions and interactions keep the tyrannical at bay, with a clear alignment of interests that is a predictable and effective mechanism in resolving powerful differences and between groups in the way that we arrange our politics. But what do we have rather than these clear lines of citizen and state? The law. What we have are two realms and two codes. One is built from the Constitution, laws, courthouses, government offices, parliaments, police forces, counterterrorism officials. It dresses in a suit and tie like myself and speaks in English or French. Then there's another much older series of cultural codes, much, much older, that precede the coming to life of what we think of as the formal code. In these cultural codes are laws, treaties, traditions, mechanisms for regulating behavior, for reward and punishment. And many Africans step back and forth between the two, rarely resolving in any decisive way the deep contradictions that are so often at hand. A good example. You purchase a piece of land down the road past the airport. Perfectly legitimate piece of land. You hand over the money, you get your title deed. Land prices take off. This is good. It was a good investment. The owner of the land comes back and says, he never sold you the land anyway, because of course, it's community land, right? So it's well known that you're not from this area, so you should leave. So he can get his land back and sell it to someone else. That person can move back and forth, and his action can be considered quite legitimate. It's not legal, and it is certainly illegal, but he can be willing to back up his claim with violence. In one realm is social trust, in another one is the force of the state. And rarely do the two blend into one another. Therefore, the rule of law, which is so important to all of you and to all of us, and by that I mean the rule of law according to the Constitution and laws written in books, is not treated in capitalized letters. It can be treated as suggestive. In fact, at the very heart of what so many Africans in many workshops that we have here say call bad governance has a lot to do with the back and forth, the ability to move from the legitimacy of the cultural to the illegal of the state at the very same time. It's quite easy here in Kenya, when you speak a lot in that sort of constitutional legal way, for someone to say, well, unaongea kizungu mingi, meaning, hey man, you're talking a lot of white man stuff. Right? Or, once I was told, oh my God, you've brought the Panadol document, as in you have to take a painkiller to read that document. Right? Now, I'm setting out a problem and a dilemma, and I think an opportunity. The picture gets substantially worse because that huge demographic shift that has happened in terms of a huge, what people call that youth bulge, increasingly, those young people are not really in either of these codes. They've left the cultural thing. They don't find it relevant. They're now in Nairobi. They are in a new culture, a much more urbanized culture. But at the same time, their entry into this so-called formal system is made very difficult by the barriers to entry. Sometimes those barriers being informational, other times being attitudinal, and other times just being the realities of red tape and gatekeeping. While feeling increasingly alienated from the social and cultural mores that their parents respect, and their grandparents especially respect so much. They are full of desires and ambitions, fed by their incredible access to information, that their educations and the economy as it operates gives them scarce means to achieve. There's somebody here, I think there's a firm called Well Told Story that was telling me about what this idea of cruel optimism, where many of the young people are brought up in that realm of the formal schools, many very badly run, many run by governments badly, and they are told that they have to fulfill this series of exams and passes, and that they will then get a job at the end, and they will be successful. But it turns out, in an economy like Kenya, of the almost 800,000 people that come out of the schooling system every year, barely a tenth of them can get a job in a formally registered business. The overwhelming majority remain either in the informal sector or do not have any work. Where's the opportunity in this? The opportunity is that this room, and those of you who are thinking and researching and writing, can recognize that within those cultural codes is an incredible wealth of knowledge, of legitimacy, and of the ability to take change if they're embraced and if they are brought to closer harmony with a more formal realm. It means that there's a lot of work to be done on the concept of private property, of the rights of the individual in traditional African cultures. Not in a highly academic, removed way, but in a way that tries to understand where these cultures are and what they've evolved to, and to try and bring the two together. Let me tell you what I mean by that practically. In Kenya, across the north and in the borderlands, are a lot of clashes over cattle. There are cattle raids back and forth. There are essentially community versus community wars for water and pasture. And the state, whether it's a state based in Nairobi or the state that is headquartered in Addis Ababa, is perpetually trying to quell these forms of conflict. But rarely does the state's action understand that within those cultures and those peoples that are fighting for pasture are often long-standing treaties and agreements about how you access each other's pasture and water. And that the fight a lot of times is because the treaty has been broken. So it seems to me, and this is some of the work that I did in the past, that those more ancient and older legal systems need some way of being recognized and knit together with this newer structure of laws. It's in this movement and this bringing together where your concept and your passion for the protection of private property and the liberty of the individual will take deep roots within the cultures of Africa. I also believe that Africa desperately needs to build stable politics that can handle our differences without breaking down and risking violence. When we got independence here in Kenya, we immediately adopted the Westminster model. First past the post, winner take all. And what it did when our elections were free and fair, especially our presidential elections, it plunged us into a perpetual crisis every 5 years. Because our politics, if you remember me talking about the issue of the group, our politics were organized not on the issues of the day, but on identity. And so, if you win, and you've won 55% of the vote, but the 55% essentially is a patching together of ethnic groups. What about the 45% or the 40% who voted for the other guy? What are they to think? Unfortunately, now according to the model, they're supposed to wait their turn and compete again in 5 years. But then you can say, well, look, we have a pretty good ethnic alliance here, and the numbers are with us, so we'll win again 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. So they have to disrupt it. And they disrupt it with a style of politics that is negative, that can be threatening, and can be deeply destabilizing. So how do you build a politics that is more stable? Here in Kenya, last year, I was very proud to be part of what Kenyans call the handshake, where our 2017 election had broken down. We had a winner, but it was hotly contested by the loser, who insisted that he had been rigged out. And his supporters, by and large, believed him. Now, it doesn't matter anymore whether he was right or wrong. What matters is that they believed they had been robbed. And so started confrontations, street confrontations. There were threats of secession.
It was a hot, scary political climate. At the height of it, right when the opposition leader took an oath, not a real oath, but he went to the middle of the city and swore himself in as president. Now remember, we're talking about group politics. So this is very explosive, it's very risky. And what I saw was these two leaders, His Excellency our President, and the head of the opposition, who's called Raila Odinga, at some point pulled back and decided to speak. And this led to a series of negotiations, and they shook hands last March. And Kenya as one became calm. The calm, you see, is the flip side of the choppiness. The calm should not calm you, because it means that the politics are driven in that way. So they can be driven in the opposite way as well. But they gave us a chance to begin a deep conversation in Kenya about what do we want and how do we want to change our country. And so right now as I speak, we're in a process of consultation, debate, and analysis that is going to bring deep and lasting changes to our politics that look at this issue of ethnic competition and antagonism, the issue of shared prosperity, the issue of a national ethos, the issues of corruption, and we're going to have to re-engineer our country. This is an opportunity for all of you. As much as libertarians want to keep politics at bay, and perhaps the state at bay, you have a lot of work to do to reshape the African state. The African state, bar almost none, requires deep reforms, big bang reforms, and they must be informed by this idea of stabilization and pragmatism. That is an opportunity for you. We also, and I'm coming to the end, need a security sector that protects every citizen and that can overcome the extremisms that characterize this age. There's a great book out that talks about the rise of tribalism in Europe and North America. When Africans look at the politics going on in parts of the West, we recognize them very well. We understand the politics of the big man. We understand the politics of triggering identity. And of course, I say this with a bit of brackets because the whole identity politics thing didn't start in Africa. It actually started in the West, and the Western universities especially. But how you can have a country that can overcome or survive these extremisms. And all these extremisms, whether it's the far-right extremism in the West people are talking about, or different forms of ethnic extremism here, or religious extremism, all depend on this idea of the group being more important than the individual. The idea being that you can punish a person for the sins of their group, that you can discriminate, that you can even mass murder on the basis of identity. They're all characterized by that idea. And you in this room are coming from the opposite idea, that the individual and the minority needs to be protected from the majority. Now, my job requires me to constantly be thinking about jihadist terrorism. I wake up thinking about it, I sleep thinking about it. And in between the day, that's what I do. The one thing we've not done here in Kenya, and I dare say nowhere in Africa, if not the world, is build a powerful, cogent argument against them. Now, if there's an argument you need to win, it is that against those extremists. I believe when I look at this network of 490 think tanks around the world, who are all deeply committed to learning and to arguing and to advocating. Let me aim your lens, if you're in Nigeria and West Africa, at Boko Haram. If you're here in East Africa, at Al-Shabaab. Because it's not just their violence, it's that they're reaching deep into the society and driving their ideas forward. And their ideas are usually meeting very fertile ground for a variety of reasons that I will not go into. We have to answer them. And those of us in the state do not know how to argue ideas. That's not what we do. We have lots of guns, we have lots of tanks, we have trucks, we have bombs. We don't have libraries in government offices. So you guys need to fight that fight. Because when you let us be the ones who fight it, we can easily overreach ourselves and harm the very liberties that you're trying to protect. We need an economy that allows small businesses and entrepreneurs the opportunity to compete against one another, rather than spending more time worrying about the gatekeeper who's masquerading as a regulator. I live with an entrepreneur, my wife June, and I've learned more in these last 2 or 3 years that she's been at the spear point of driving her enterprise than I ever have before about what an entrepreneur needs. And what is amazing is how stark what she needs is from the discussions I have in government offices. Often the discussions we have so many consequences that we don't even think about that directly affect the chances of her business. But if her business does not work, then the continent will not work. And so there is, I think, fertile ground for you to make strong arguments against the gatekeeper and the rent seeker. These are arguments not just to be made to the state, but to the people themselves. Because the culture of gatekeeping, the culture of the big man, whether it's within the state or in politics, is such that so many people believe that their future and their fortune depends on knowing Martin Kimani, who is in government, who can get you a tender. And so they will line up and they will say, am I the same ethnic group as him? Are we from the same family? And that lining up will increase my power and my ability to accumulate more for myself. If the people themselves do not begin to understand that lowering those barriers to competition are for them, we will never win this fight. They have to understand that. And it's your job to work hard. And those of you, the African think tanks here, the African champions for libertarian ideas, need to take those ideas down to the people. But when you take them down to the people, and you tell them about Hayek, and you tell them about the law, you may need to explain it in their language. You may need to bring it to them and spark that curiosity that allows them to then pick up those ideas from Hayek and run with them. So there's a lot of work, as I said, in between, in that act of translation, presentation, and advocacy. Let me finish by saying, Africa, to do all the things I've said, and I could talk here about our free trade area, we're just discussing it with Leon, about the different things Africa is doing in terms of its liberalization. I could talk about Kenya's financial tech. I could talk about a lot of positive things. But to really unleash the genius of African people, we need confidence. We need the confidence that comes from owning our problems. And it means weaning ourselves from the psychological demoralization that comes with our present condition. That condition is one in which kind Westerners come with money and tell us that they're here to help us, that their money is going to take the edge off our pain. It will reduce our problems. You know, I used to think of this, when June used to describe it to me a long time ago, I used to think of it, yeah, okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. It's only when I got to government that I understood the enormous psychological damage those workshops do. This hotel probably has a large percentage of its revenues from those conferences. I would actually say those conferences are probably the biggest tourism earner in Kenya. In every hotel, almost every day, there's a group of people, our best and brightest, seated around a table, being told, we are the solution. It's almost like if I was conspiracy-minded, I would think it's a form of warfare. And the sum total of it is the hit on your confidence it gives you. It makes you believe that there's nothing you can count on within your own culture, within your own understanding, that your lessons and your models must come from them. It's USAID that knows how to bring public health. It's DFID that understands how to empower the girl child. Now, of course, people from USAID and DFID would be horrified with what I'm saying because they go to great lengths to respect identities, right? Communities. And there's a whole language there that makes it even impossible for you to understand what's happening. So our confidence is at a low ebb. Our desires are at a high ebb, our confidence is at a low ebb. So it's crucial that many of you begin to raise our confidence, not just by speaking about ideas, but becoming the living proof of African genius unleashed. We need business executives, we need businesses that succeed. We need businesses that succeed from people who, according to the common story, were never meant to succeed. We need at least 1 or 2 African countries to get wealthy in the next generation. I'm not talking about skewed wealth just by some sort of quick sales of whatever is at hand, but genuine production and competition by a country that has lowered the barriers to its people competing and exercising and showing who they are, by forms of social and cultural mentorship that have been embraced and brought to the mainstream so that they create young people with the attitude and the confidence to go for it. I believe that confidence is in this room, and part of your job is to imbue it in the rest of our people and to work to highlight the shining examples, some who are in this room, so that everyone can begin to see that it's not the workshop that will save me, it's not a job with the government, it's not a phone call to my brother or my brother's friend's friend who works for the government, but it's for me to start my own small business and go for it. I wish you all the best, and I want to say that I think one of the places where that success can be held and shown is right here in Kenya. Kenya is a country of unique gifts, a country that is deeply self-critical, a country whose leaders sometimes make an incredible turn towards pragmatism, a country that has opened itself up in terms of its economy, not enough, but much more than was the case 20 years ago. So I urge all of you to see what you can do in Kenya so that we can work together to create one of those living examples of African success and African genius unleashed that the world will depend on in the years to come. I thank you so much for this opportunity. Tom, and all of you. And if I have said anything, especially in my very critical remarks about culture, that have given you a little twinge of pain, Please understand I meant it positively, because we have to say our truths so that we can grow from them. Thank you very much and have a good night.
Thank you, Martin. I have to say, it was a tour de force of political science, economics, psychology, and a deep understanding of institutions. And you have challenged and inspired. In fact, you have inspired by challenging in the best way for us to learn, to listen, to think, and to act on the basis of knowledge and wisdom, to be able to achieve the dignity that every person on the continent of Africa deserves because of the uniqueness of every African person. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I want the copy so that I can study that in future. This is a text that will be remembered. That is a fantastic and powerful, almost conclusion to the evening. As we're wrapping up the Africa Liberty Awards dinner, I'd like to invite my good friend Linda Kavuka to come to the stage to announce the location of next year's Africa Liberty Forum.
Mabibi na mabwana, are you ready? Do I go on with the Swahili? Okay, so I have a feeling that some of you are under some influence, and I want to teach you Swahili slang. Are you ready for slang? Yeah? So, okay, sasa is like hey. So when I say sasa, your response is poa. Sasa? So sasa is a saying you say to an individual, like singular, one person, right? So if I want to say hey to you in plural, this audience, for example, I'm going to say saseni, okay? So follow the lead of the Kenyans. And I'm going to add two other words. Watu means people, wangu means mine. Say watu, wangu. Okay, so I'm the one who will say those. Yours is just poor, okay? Poor only. Your response is poor. Okay? We'll rehearse. Saseni watu wangu. Saseni watu wangu. Louder, the last one. Saseni watu wangu. Thank you very, very much for honoring our invite. And I think you would agree with me that this year, Atlas Network and Students for Liberty, we have done a great job in bringing the entire African delegation to the Africa Liberty Forum. A round of applause for all of you. We have managed to get representatives from North Africa, Southern Africa, West Africa, and the great Eastern Africa community. Well, it's been one long year for us, and I have been working closely with James. James, where are you? Please wave to the crowd. Thank you so much, James. James is behind arranging this whole event. I've worked with James. I don't know if Sherry is in the room. So for the past year, we've been working together with James and Sherry to put up the program and set the logistics and everything that has made the ALF what it is today here in Nairobi, Kenya. So we at Students for Liberty feel honored to have hosted the Africa Liberty Forum twice over, first in Nigeria last year, and second in Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you so much, Atlas Network. And we would not be who we are today, and by we I mean the libertarian community in Africa, if not for a few people who had walked with us from the very beginning. And Tom calls her Agent W, and I'm going to call her Linda Whetstone, first of her name, for those of you who watch Game of Thrones. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the mentorship you have given all of us. To Franklin Kujo, to Rejoice Ngwenya, to Brad Lips, to Magat Ward, to June Arunga, thank you so much. Some of you may not know them, but they represent the people who walked with us, held our hands, and taught us, and we are who we are today. So I'd ask the SFL delegation in the room to stand and wave. If you're from SFL, just stand and wave from where you are. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for making this event beautiful. As you can see, most of them are wearing African attire in the different colors. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys. So it has been my pleasure to host you, and I hope you've enjoyed yourself so far. And I hope you're ready for tomorrow, right? Right? You guys don't have energy, really? Okay. So, drum rolls. The Africa Liberty Forum 2020 is going to be hosted in another country that I claim citizenship in. Ghana! Franklin Kujo, please come to the stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Linda. Whoever came up with the catchword or the signature word, inspire, for the 2019 Liberty Forum did marvelously well. I think we've all been deeply inspired. And I can only say that in Accra, we will aspire to match what has been done here, even though we were the first to host the ALF. See you in Accra.
Thank you so much. That concludes the evening.